It's now time for your Election Crimes Bulletin with Greg Palast.
And this is Dennis Bernstein with Greg Palast. You're listening to the Election Crimes Bulletin. Greg is still on the front lines in Georgia. Well, Greg, today control of the House and the Senate remain up in the air as President Biden struck an optimistic tone at the White House. Georgia's Senate race will head to a runoff, while races in Arizona and Nevada have yet to be called. But that race in Georgia, that's really at the center of all of it. It's unfolding now. It will be happening. The runoff is in a month. Greg, what are your concerns as you continue to investigate and continue your multi-year investigation into election crimes there? Where are we, Greg? Where's this going? It seems like you're right in the right place at the right time, although some folks would not want you there.
To say the least. Actually, I'm turning from Reverend Lowry Boulevard onto Reverend Ralph Abernathy Boulevard. So my personal concern is, after 9 years, why am I still coming back to Georgia? So I'll let you in on it. In fact, I had a discussion with the head of the New Georgia Project. Why is it always Georgia? Which, as Zach Roberts says, is the test kitchen of the vote suppression techniques. So it is coming back down to Georgia who's going to control the Senate, at least the Senate race, and there'll be now a runoff between Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock and football hero from Texas, Herschel Walker, who graced Georgia by moving in to run for Senate. I am very concerned, speaking with the leadership of the New Georgia Project today and the other organizations. There is, again, this new law, 98 pages of terrifying, sophisticated Jim Crow trickery called SB 202, signed by Governor Brian Kemp, who defeated Stacey Abrams last night. There's going to be a runoff because Warnock fell just a few. We don't have a final count, but it looks like just a couple thousand votes short of. He is ahead. He did win, but he didn't win 50% plus one vote to avoid a runoff. And there's no question, speaking to all leadership, that it's Jim Crow which is forcing him into a runoff. Otherwise, he'd want it clean for several things, including the fact, for example, as you know, reported that 1,000 absentee ballots were not given out in Cobb County, Democratic county. But we only know about the 1,000 because it's a Democratic county, and they said that we made a mistake and we're going to correct it. We're going to let those people vote up until November 14th, the military deadline. There's 159 counties in Georgia, and clearly there's been a massive attack on mail-in voting. They removed drop boxes. As I mentioned last night, there's 83% drop in mail-in balloting. Is it because people don't know how to lick a stamp? Is it because – no. The answer is 83 – and because for the first time, mail-in voting used to be a Republican turf. During COVID 2020, it switched, and so that it's almost all Democrats, progressive voters, voters of color, and the Republicans decided to go on a campaign against mail-in voting. So they made it almost impossible. You have to include an ID identification to mail-in vote. You're not getting your ballots on time, certainly not on time to get them counted. In addition, they virtually eliminated drop boxes. As if the post office said, we're eliminating post office boxes. You can only mail letters during open post office hours. This is the type of games that they're playing. So you had a drop in mail-in ballots of 1.2 million to 0.2, a loss of 1 million ballots. But there's something else going on in this runoff. They changed the runoff. Remember, they got wiped out, the Republicans. They lost both Senate seats in a runoff in January 5 of last year. So they lost 2 Senate seats to Republicans. So their response was to cut the runoff time from 60 days to 30 days. You say, well, what's the big deal? The answer is this. You need more than 30 days to register to vote in Georgia. And therefore, the deadline to register for the runoff was the day before the general election yesterday. I kid you not. So that if you say, oh, my God, America's fate is down to this runoff, I'm going to register, or I'm old enough now to register. A lot, literally thousands of people registered would qualify young people. They're Democratic voters. So they missed the deadline. That's how they designed it, so that runoff would make it impossible. You would miss the deadline for registering for the runoff by one day. It's brilliant. The other thing
you'd need a time machine to vote yesterday. By the way, this did not come up at the presidential press conference. It was a happy face. Everything is going beautifully. No problems in this with voter suppression in Georgia. It didn't exist in most of the press conference that I heard. But in any event, you've got a film, Greg,
yes.
that's very important. It's called Vigilante, yes. Georgia's voter suppression hitman. It's important, and it really sheds a powerful spotlight on what we're talking about here. So it's called Vigilante, Georgia's voter suppression hitman. And, well, just remind people, I mean, because it's all happening in Georgia, a place where this has been part of the plan since the plantation.
Yes, so let me mention something very important. In Georgia, you have automatic voter registration when you get a driver's license, like a lot of states, like California. But the Secretary of State's office admitted that it, quote, made a mistake in turning off the automatic registration when people were registering, the new young voters and the new people moving into Georgia from the north. So they come in and they get their driver's license. It's overwhelmingly Democratic. The people applying for driver's licenses, it's a Democratic demographic. They supposedly accidentally, for 6 months, for half of this year, shut off the registration when you get your driver's license. And one county alone, Cobb County, said they lost 100,000 voters. Let me repeat that. They lost 100,000 voters. It's Democratic demographic voters. And the Secretary of State's office, who's a Republican, said, "Oh, we're so sorry. We fixed the problem." And so this New Georgia Project, which was an organization founded by Stacey Abrams years ago, they said, "Well, what do you mean you fixed the problem? So you're registering those people?" "Oh, no, just that in the future," after the election, of course, if someone registers their car or they register for a license or get a license, we'll register them to vote. But they're not going to take those 100,000 people, put them on the roll. People who thought that they were being registered automatically, and they weren't. 100,000 voters. And Senator Reverend Warnock, is going to have to go through fight in a runoff because he's missing a couple thousand votes. Just in that registration game was his clean victory. Just in his registration, the sending out of absentee ballots. Again, the closing of the dropboxes. Every one of these things. And a new rule that requires you to include ID with your registration. People, didn't know that they had to include this ID. It's very confusing, these absentee ballots, deliberately. And then they are stalling on adding people to the voter rolls. In California, you go online, you register, you get instant verification. You are now a voter. Welcome. In Georgia, you register, and they say, well, they have to verify your address. Well, just a second. They'll issue a driver's license immediately, but then when they register you to vote, they have to verify. What does it mean? I thought that they verified it when you got your driver's license. They let you drive a car with that address. So each of these little things, like New Georgia Project said to me today, the head of it, Kendra Cotton, she said, look, it's death by 1,000 cuts. That's how they take these elections, because it's in Georgia, it's always a few thousand votes one way or the other for the parties. And, they simply pull people off the registries. They also massive disqualification of ballots. One of the tricks that they use is that you have to match your driver's license exactly to your registration name and your signature. So, for example, I had breakfast this morning with the last leader of New Georgia Project, Nse Ufot. She has an African name. In the state records, they're always getting it wrong. She has an accent over the E on her name. And so if she has a driver's license with the accent and a registration form without the accent, her vote's disqualified. These are the games that are being played here. It's ugly, and it's Jim Crow, but it's in that, nothing screams we're aiming at black people, but who has names like Mohammed, which are miskeyed into the state registrations, the voter registry list? You have to understand these races are being determined by a few votes in each direction. So all they have to do is shave here and shave there and shave there. But they test drive these techniques in Georgia, and they're, as Martin Sheehan, my producer, says in the introduction to our film, it starts in Georgia, but it's coming to a state near you.
Greg, let me just jump in here and ask the dumb question. Why wouldn't the Democratic Party officials be jumping up and down? Because this appears to be happening under their eyes. Is everybody, Raffensperger's reputation has been deteriorating. People all don't believe he's a hero, but a lot of people don't know what's going on. Why would the Democrats be so quiet?
Okay, the National Democratic Party, and again, the state party is headed by Stacey Abrams. She screams bloody murder, but even she's been told, shut up. As you know, the president said, don't vote for anyone who won't accept the results of an election. And, of course, Stacey Abrams famously was the first candidate in a long time to say, this vote wasn't fair. I got the most votes. I won't be inaugurated. I do not concede. I do not accept this election. I know that I can't win in the courts on this, but America shouldn't lose this way. The voters should decide. And she got slammed by the National Democratic Party. Slammed. And, how I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that's what it is. And therefore, the groups in Georgia do not rely on the party, the Democratic Party, to save their vote. They're saying and that's why these groups are staunchly nonpartisan. They're saying we're not here for the Democratic Party. We're here for the voters. And yes, most of our voters of color, young people, a huge LGBTQ population here. Atlanta's kind of the San Francisco of the South. And I say, these voters, they'll vote Democratic. But there are voters, they're not Democratic voters. And so, therefore, the fight for the vote can't be partisan, because if you're going to rely on the parties to protect you, good luck.
Is there any chance, there are hosts here and there, if you will. They're not usually the regular ones on the corporate networks that have expressed a bit of outrage and touched on the subject, the issue that you've been on for so long. But any interest in your work, Greg? I mean, you're BBC, Rolling Stone. You certainly have a reputation for reporting, particularly about elections. What's the deal?
We have to do is we have to work around these so-called news and comment programs. I was just told MSDNC, as I call it, does not want me on. I was scheduled. They don't want to. Again, the line is American elections are perfect. Yes, we can use the term vote suppression as long as it's well before an election, but somehow vote suppression actually never affects the outcome. And so I'm a party pooper. I'm the guy in his underpants at the debutante ball. They don't want that. But it's not complaining about me. So we used various tricks. For example, when Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin was bounced from the polls in Georgia, and I filmed that. I filmed her granddaughter hysterical and in tears that this 92-year-old woman is bounced out of the polls wrongly. So we got her on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah. So we work around it. We get people like Jamie Foxx. We get people. We tell the story through. The great Boots Riley. Takes our message out through the music world. So we have to work. Look, if you're expecting the corporate media to take on a position that's going to threaten the ownership of the powerful, because this is in the end the real story. Talking to the head of New Georgia Project tonight, she said, look, yes, it's racial. Yes, it's ugly. Yes, it's partisan. That is, it's usually the Republicans who are leading this charge. But it says in the end, it's about the money. It's about corporate and oligarch power in America. This is how they keep it, and it's the same oligarchs that own the media. That's why I'm talking to you on Pacifica Radio. That's why I'm talking to you on KPFA and KPFK and all the other outlets wonderful outlets that carry the Election Crimes Bulletin because, there's no one at Pacifica that's afraid that they're going to lose their yacht, that they're going to be taxed because black people are allowed to vote. So in the end, it comes down to class war, because the truth is, vote suppression is class war by other means.
Absolutely. And Jim Crow in the 21st century, I mean, that's been your work, has been so much more thorough, wide-ranging, and it's like a disease. It's a virus that goes across states that is being shared by folks who are trying to suppress the rights of brown and black people, young people. Oftentimes people are on the Democratic side, but it's not just them. And it's so dangerous. It really is a troubling moment in history, Greg. It's been a problem that you've been on top of, that your information, your investigations have made available, accessible, so that some of us at least can understand. Please stay safe. Keep us posted. We want to know. The people of Pacifica want to know what is going on. We're going to watch this runoff and what goes on here very closely with your help, Greg. Thank you.
Best from Georgia. Bye.
Greg Palast from Georgia, gregpalast.com. Check it out, gregpalast.com. Check out the film. Check out the work. It's incredibly important and timely.